This podcast is produced by Passion Nerdly in association with the Nerds Domain and our parent network, the Southgate Media Group. This podcast could not exist without their support or from support by Patreons like you. For more information on how you can get involved, visit passionnerdly.com.
Good evening and welcome back to Pattern Recognition, our Fringe rewatch. These are so hard to say. Fringe rewatch podcast.
Say that 5 times fast.
I have always had a hard time with R's and W's. When it comes to the Great Wars, I have a hard time saying World War with any kind of speed. So, but yes, this is our Fringe rewatch podcast. Here on Passion Nerdly with John and Roxy.
Oh, yeah. Hi, guys.
And we just finished watching episode 4, The Arrival.
And
wow.
I am... Yeah, we just literally finished it seconds ago.
Yeah.
And I've had... I feel prepared for this, but at the same time, wow, what a whirlwind.
It's a good episode. I enjoyed it a lot. This is one of the memorable episodes for me, because we finally get the Observer. And the first time I saw this show, I had never seen the Observer in previous episodes.
See, I recognized him from the previous episode. I remember there was a bald guy. It's like when I saw him show up in the show, I was like, he was somewhere. I've seen him before. And then, he's the Observer.
Yep. We will get into who he is and his real name, the actor's real name. But this was The Arrival. It is a 47-minute long episode, and it aired first on the 30th of September in 2008. The IMDb synopsis says, a strange cylinder which is somehow connected to Walter and a man known as the Observer appears from the ground at a construction site, which is exactly how the story opens. We are at a construction site in Brooklyn.
Yep.
There's a crane that is doing some... I don't remember the crane actually ever picking anything up because you see the hook.
Yeah, it looks more like they were possibly...
moving it into place?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it had the ball on it, so it was, the multi-purpose one that could be used for destruction, for demolition. Right.
So, we're at the East River Coffee Shop in Brooklyn, and inside the diner is the Observer. Fans of the show know very well who he is, but yeah, this is the first time he gets camera time where the camera is trained on him specifically. He orders a roast beef sandwich on a roll, meat raw as possible, room temperature water, no ice. He asks the waitress if there are jalapenos. Yeah. She says, yeah, I think he has some. He says, I want 11 jalapenos on the side. And she is clearly a little unsure of his order, but goes on her way. And then we see him look out at the construction site.
Yeah.
Open up his black leather journal. Oh,
yeah, he's taking notes. Yeah.
Starts taking notes. And then he gets out his little opera glasses, and we realize that they're not just simple opera glasses. They are some type of
technology.
Very high-tech scanner.
Yeah. And, yeah, it's definitely a scanning device. I mean, the readout had all kinds of little things like depth, penetration, pulse, radar.
Yeah.
And
as he's looking... like text blurbs, and the text is far too small and far away to see, but it keeps like measuring spots on the faces that he's looking at in the construction workers' heads, and little blurbs of text are coming up. So it's very interesting. You can tell that he's doing something. And he closes his opera glasses. It doesn't take long to cook this, because it's as raw as possible. So she brings back the food, and he begins to dress it which is an entire bottle of black pepper, a lot of Tabasco. And
he
the
noms
waitress
down on that
Yeah.
thing.
The waitress and another his waitress and another woman are watching him, and they're just in awe because he puts all the peppers on it, and he just snarfs it in a few huge bites. As he's eating it. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to note, I mean, as a strange thing, because it brought up memories for me. I mean, I had a friend who had chemotherapy when they were very young. And as a result of chemotherapy, they had very little sense of taste. And literally would douse everything in jalapenos and Tabasco sauce just to be able to taste the food. And it kind of reminded me of that.
There are so much better hot sauces than Tabasco.
Yeah.
Personal opinion.
But it was the only way that she could actually taste anything.
And I feel like when Amanda's mom, my best friend, when her mom went through chemotherapy, I feel like there were some taste issues there too. But anyway, while he's eating, a rumbling starts to occur from the construction site. They start to freak out. They start to leave. I say they start to leave, but no, they're running away.
Explosions.
An explosion essentially happens. It goes back to him. Well, I guess right before it goes, the rumbling starts. The waitresses come back and she notices his writing, which is a very strange glyphic language that he writes right to left. And she's
not to be confused with Gallifreyan.
Yeah, no, it looks a lot different than Gallifreyan to me. It's very it's not so much big circles and concentric circles or anything. It just looks strange. But she asks if it's Korean, and he's like, no. I mean, he doesn't show any emotion. He's just, he feels very alien. But yeah, as this rumbling starts, there's essentially an explosion, looks like a gas main explosion, and everybody runs, the crane collapses. After the crane collapses, he calmly gets up, dons his fedora and his dark glasses, grabs his briefcase, exits the diner. There are a couple strange blue flashes. I don't know if it was just...
Yeah, weird lens flares that have been added.
I mean, it is J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was just lens flares or if it is some sort of energy that we see kind of associated in the area around the observer. Mm-hmm. But he goes, looks down into a pit. We don't see what he looks at, but he looks down into the construction site where the explosion happened, and he gets on some sort of device, some sort of communication device, and says, it looks kind of like a cell phone, but clearly all of his other stuff is super high tech, so it's probably not a standard cell phone, but he says it has arrived. And so that takes us to the credits, and we then, after that, we go back into, like we mentioned last episode, and we're getting these glimpses of domestic life of our characters.
Between specifically Peter and Walter.
This time it was specifically Peter and Walter. We actually don't get Olivia doing the John Scott thing like she had been doing.
No.
We don't see her until after this exchange with Walter and Peter, where Peter is listing off some chemical formula at 3 o'clock in the morning. Turns out it's for root beer. Walter hasn't had a root beer in 17 years. Peter, this scene sets up the episode where he is just a grumpy Gus the entire stinking episode. You can tell he's fidgety. He explains it in a bit, but he ends up kind of getting in his little grumpy mood, and he's like, I'm going to go sleep in the bath. And he's unhappy about that because Walter didn't drain the bathtub. So, I mean, it's just grumpy. And so it immediately shoots to him at the federal building getting harassed by... I say harassed. He was probably harassing her more. He doesn't have credentials to get into Olivia's office, but he just strides right in, and the lady's like, you can't be here. You don't have clearance.
You have to have an escort.
Yeah, and... but Olivia comes and meets him at the door, or meets him as he approaches her office, and he's like, can I talk to her now? Yeah. Well, yeah, but he says, I'm tired of being here. You don't need me. I am a glorified babysitter. I can't stand living in this hotel room with Walter. And essentially, he was up until 5 a.m. Rattling off the formulas for his favorite beverages, all while naked because he likes the breeze.
Yeah.
So he was still Walter. He says is still asleep because of this, but he wants out. He's like no one needs me, and she's like, oh well, you're He goes, I'm not anyone special, and she says, no, you decipher what he says, and you're his son, and so she kind of pulls the
little bit of guilt.
A little bit of guilt there, but anyway, they get called out on a job.
To the S.E. Kramer building.
S.E. Kramer building, yeah. So they get called on a job, and their conversation gets cut a little short. Walter is there, very chipper, greeting everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Big smile. Good
he's
morning.
He's a morning
good morning.
person.
Good morning. Yeah, yeah. So they discuss. They have the canister, the cylinder. There.
Yeah, they call it the cylinder, but it's very odd. I mean, it looks like. I'm going to say it. It looks like the front of a bullet, It
looks like an actual bullet, not the round. It looks like a bullet.
It looks like a bullet. It has a strange, rifling to it. Yeah, that's what it looks like. I mean, it's the spiral pattern descending with blue glowing lights in it that seem to correspond to the lens flares.
Yeah, it is the same color as the lens flare. Just 1 second.
No problem. Good.
Sorry, it's...
Yeah, take a break a second and get some water or anything?
No, I've got water right here.
Okay.
Cut all my coughing out. Okay. But yeah, it does correspond to the lens flares. Lens flares. I didn't really, but it is the same color.
Yeah.
And so we see what was apparently found at the dig site that we didn't get to see earlier. But it is a capsule. Later on, Peter refers to it as a giant. It's a giant metal suppository. It does. That is. It's the kind of the shape. It's a.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Broyles says, it dug through. I think he said.
Several meters.
A long way. Went ripped through a subway tunnel, I think he said. And it actually caused the gas main explosion because it went right through the gas line. And, so sorry. Let me see my notes here. But yeah, device came from underground. A lot of people think that it fell from the sky, but it actually came from underground. Like I said, ripped through the subway, came to rest on the surface as though someone would come and pick it up. Broyles does tell them this is not the first time this has happened. It actually happened in '87 at Quantico. Mentions the lead investigator at that time, who apparently knows Olivia.
Yeah, Colonel Jacobson.
Yeah, Colonel Henry Jacobson. And so says Jacobson is looking forward to seeing you again.
Yep. So traveling to Roseville, Virginia.
Well, before that, we have the discussion with Peter and Olivia where he essentially says, "This is it. After this one, I'm out."
Yeah.
And so that whole situation has come to a head. We also see another still a running thing in the show where he wants Broyles, Walter says, I need to take this to my lab. Broyles says, we can't risk moving it. We would prefer you stay here. And Walter has an angry outburst. And he actually, he says, if you want access to my perspicacity, such as it exists, there are certain things that he needs. But the word perspicacity, I don't even think...
I've never heard
I mean, I can get an idea from the context what that means, but let me just do a little define here on perspicacity.
Ask our little local word nerd and see if he had an idea, but yeah.
Perspicacity, the quality of having a ready insight into things, shrewdness. So, perspicacity, I will remember, well, I probably won't remember that word, but it is a cool word and it's fun to say, perspicacity. Anyhow, so Walter gets angry, snaps at Broyles, ends up going to because he's on my lab and my equipment. So that is where we end up with that. shows Olivia then going to Roseville. I don't remember, was it New York or Virginia?
Virginia.
Okay.
Roseville, Virginia.
To meet with Jacobson. There's a little small talk. She said, "I'm glad I get to see you again."
Yeah, he discusses the death of his wife.
Yeah, his wife had died over a year previously. He seems to be a fairly charming guy. And we're really not clear on his. I mean, I guess we assumed that he trained Olivia or
something
Something
along those lines. But
But she
investigator for Quantico. I mean, maybe there was some job overlap. Who knows? But
but
at the same time, he mentions I lost my wife, but mentions losing her partner, and there's a newspaper on the table and a picture of John Scott there.
And so she changes the subject.
Oh my goodness!
Quite swiftly. She was like, "What can you tell me about the incident in 1987?"
It's like she cannot escape.
She cannot escape, and it is still fairly fresh.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, I couldn't imagine being in her position because of course the picture in the newspaper is the one that was at the funeral, which is with the flag in the back because he's an FBI agent, and so it's essentially a hero's it's a hero's portrayal again, and the death of this FBI agent, and so not only is she constantly reminded of him, but she's also constantly faced with the perception that the FBI is putting out about him, while she knows that he was a traitor.
Yep.
And they have no idea the depth of his betrayal.
And by this point in the episode, it's turning into, I mean, it is a whirlwind of an episode. Every few minutes, we're doing scene changes.
We're somewhere else.
And it's like we are being told a story. And they still managed, I don't want to say they didn't manage to tell it well. They told it extremely well, but wow, this was a ride.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I actually ran out of space on my page, and I was like writing in the margins. But yeah, so he talks about when, I think it was the morning of June 22nd, a guy was supposed to be monitoring some signals, sensors and everything go off the charts. And here comes this thing burrowed up through the ground, and they moved it into a building to study it. They understood, and this was something that Walter and Peter pointed out in the Kramer building in the previous scene, but that it is vibrating at 2 megahertz and then again at 4. And that was the same situation in 87. And then 48 hours later, after it burrowed up, it exploded. And the guy says it was an explosion like I've never seen. It exploded down into the basement below and then disappeared. So at the time, I wasn't sure if that meant it just kept going and there was just an endless burrowing, but it's kind of addressed later at the end of this episode, which we'll get to, that I don't think that's exactly what happens. But, so yeah, it sounds very interesting, and he basically warns her. He says, if this is the kind of stuff you're into, I'd steer clear. This is weird stuff.
Yeah, as a personal favor, steer clear of this.
Yeah. So it flashes very quickly to a brief scene with Walter and Astrid in the lab, and he taps a tuning fork on the device, and it begins to ring, and the pitch increases, and it kind of becomes this unbearable noise, and the camera pans out, and then it switches. Again, we had just constant scenery changes.
Yeah, and forgive us if we can't keep up with all of them, because this is like, there are points where it's like minutes and another scene change.
Yeah. So then we get, there's an attack on the Kramer building. We're back at the Kramer building where the device had been. A guy shows up, and he has an interesting looking weapon. It's a firearm. It looks like a firearm, but it's very strange. It looks like something out of a sci-fi movie. And it ends up being an energy weapon. And he just starts... Yeah. Because I think the Department of Homeland Security... Or no, not Homeland Security. The NSA. The NSA has actually got the Kramer building kind of locked down. And he just starts plowing through guards. And it's not bullets and blood. It's just like pulses, like energy pulses or something, because they just kind of blow out of the way when he shoots him. It moves a car at one point. But he gets in, finds a scientist. He's like, where is it? And we don't get anything else after that. It transfers back to Olivia, and she is awoken by her cell phone ringing. And when it rings, she answers it, and it's very staticky. There's a lot of interference and noise. And someone says, Olivia, and she says, hello, and there's more noise, and I think it says, where are you? And there's more noise, and she says, and she recognizes the voice and says, John. And there's more static, and then it's silence. The line is disconnected. She calls I assume the FBI, said, I got a call on my cell phone. And she verifies her identity. Can you trace it or tell me where it came in from? And she's like, we don't have records of calls in the last 3 hours. So something weird's going on there. But remember, like at the end of last episode, John Scott's, brain was connected to some machine in Massive Dynamic, and it seemed like they were downloading information from it.
And I figured maybe, I figured, ghosts in the wires or, kind of thing.
Yeah. So, what are you doing?
I was looking up whether or not, did you ever look to see if he had appeared earlier in the episode?
Who?
John Wesley. If he was the guy at the Quantico.
I don't think so, because they mention who he is at the end, and he's a nobody. When we were watching this scene earlier, there was this, when she's talking with the investigator, Colonel Jacobson, who had files on hand with pictures of all this information. He started showing pictures of the investigation at Quantico, and one of them was this gentleman who was wearing army fatigues and had, this had a very interesting profile to me, and he looked a lot like... Yeah, John thought it was the same guy.
Yeah, John Mosley.
Mosley, they... I don't think they... I mean, they don't really mention... They don't link it back, so I
guess
doubt it.
It wasn't him, but, it was just a profile shot, so I'm probably wrong.
But, anyhow, let's see, where were we? We got the call, and so then we have Walter... And Peter in the lab again. Walter's still studying. This is the point at which Peter calls it a giant metal suppository.
Yeah, the suppository, and
he's still very, very, very. Pardon me for saying so. He's very pissy. It's just like, come on, man.
And his dad is not really giving answers at the same time, and so he does the whole reverse.
Yeah, he goes,
thing.
okay, because he asks him, he's like, so what is it, Walter? And Walter doesn't answer. He's just looking at documents and looking at readouts. And he says, if I use reverse psychology, if I tell you right now, don't tell me what this thing is, will you tell me? And he doesn't exactly tell him. He just says, but he does start to speak. And he says, I was tasked on Project Thor to develop subterranean missiles that would travel from the point of origin through the Earth's core and out the other side and attack a target on the other side of the Earth, essentially.
Which he says, that makes no sense.
Or that's impossible, that's ridiculous. And he says, open your minds. And this is where we start to see Walter kind of stand up for himself with Peter, because Peter is constantly snarking at him. And he says, must you always be so sarcastic? And they kind of come to a head a little bit later, but...
it was... have an open mind or someone will open it for you.
Yeah, and he goes, that doesn't make any sense either. But as they're arguing, of course, Olivia is being Olivia with her keen elf eyes, and she says, I've always been good at this. I was always good at the game concentration. I was good at seeing things and connecting things, and she points out in this picture from the investigation in 87 that there's these two soldiers standing looking at where it came up out of, but beyond a metal fence... There's the observer, and she doesn't call him that, but she says there's this bald guy, and Peter doesn't remember him, but she pulls up surveillance footage from a hospital, and she says Quincy. She said 2 weeks ago in the hospital, And I'm not sure which event that necessarily was. I don't know if it's has it only been 2 weeks since John Scott since John Scott was in the hospital? Because I don't think they've been to a hospital.
Well, that the hospital where the two were, where John Scott was, and the
well, they did an MRI on that guy. Was that in the hospital?
That's also possible. I mean,
I should have looked that up, but
yeah.
She mentions later that it was because she takes it to Broyles, but yeah, she finds the observers at a hospital 2 weeks prior. And Broyles, as soon as she shows him the pictures, he says, "Come with me." And
this is where I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, another level of knowledge.
Yeah, because it looks like Broyles has another special team specifically working on the observer.
Right, because he clears the room. There are people in this room.
Yeah.
That he asks to leave, but yeah, he said. They've got pictures of him from, I think he said, over 3 dozen scenes. All of them are pattern related. It took us a year to point him out,
and
it took you 3 weeks.
Yep.
So there's something going on. But yeah, he doesn't do anything but watch, and so they call him the observer.
Mm-hmm.
So then we move to Walter continuing to use sound to test his theories, and he plays all this noise. And Peter is ticked off more, starting arguments. Olivia calls and says somebody.
By this
time because they've learned about the attack.
There's been the attack on the building from before, the warehouse where they had been storing this device.
He hasn't attacked the other guy yet.
I thought that was right at the beginning of the scene. This is part of the problem with this. I mean, there's so many scene jumps.
I have it written down right after.
To keep up.
So they argue. There's this. Sorry, I'm trying to clear my thoughts. Peter and Walter argue some more because that's a lot of noise, and I think Peter's just frustrated. And he wants to know what this thing is, and Walter is just not forthcoming at all. Mm-hmm. Astrid gets a call from Olivia that says there's been an attack on the Kramer building. They want to move the device to
secure location.
Actually, was Olivia there? No, I think it was Astrid. But yeah, they want to move. They're moving it to a secure facility, and Walter kind of starts to move quicker, and he says, "I need tinfoil. I need tinfoil." And Peter is, argumentative, but he's like, "Must you always question me? Must you be so sarcastic? I need tinfoil to to block the transmissions that this thing is putting off."
Yeah.
And so Peter leaves to go get tinfoil, and immediately he asks Astrid, "Hand me that syringe," and he essentially sedates her.
Yeah. And
so we then it flashes to Jacobson is connected to some sort of device, is in tons of pain. He looks in distress, and it's in his home, but it is the guy who had attacked the Kramer building, and he's just got him hooked up to this thing, and he's got like an earpiece in, and he keeps like sending volts of energy through him, volts of electricity, I assume, and it's like he's like think of the girl.
Yeah,
it is torture, but it's also a method that he's using to extract information. But the information is never spoken, and he never asks for it to be spoken. He says, "Think about it. Think of the girl. Think of the girl that came and talked to you. I need, And so he shocks him. Think of her. Think of her. The guy seems to get what he wants. He says, "See, that wasn't so hard," and that's that. He takes off. Did he kill him?
Yeah. Well, he shoots with the gun. And you're not certain if he killed him or just knocked him out again.
Just knocked him out, yeah, because it's that weird energy weapon again. So we're seeing that there's this weird technology here, too, where he doesn't need to hear verbally anything that he wants to know. He can extract the information from proximity.
Yeah, and I'm starting to get this idea that maybe it's two competing factions. Because we're seeing this technology level that is far beyond
anything that we're aware of. So we have it goes to Walter. He is back at a diner, and he is enjoying a root beer float, which he had been mentioning earlier a few times in the episode. And the observer sits with him. Sorry, I'm yawning and I can't stop coughing. Yes, Walter's at a diner getting a root beer float, which he had mentioned before several times in the episode. In fact, when he sent Peter for aluminum foil, said, "If you have an opportunity to get me a root beer float, please do so." But yeah, the observer just comes in and sits down with him, and they speak as though they know each other. There's no "who are you?" There's no anything, and we're not even aware. I mean, I never saw Walter look up when Olivia started pointing at the pictures.
Well, when she described the bald man, he looked up from the background.
Okay, but he didn't say anything?
Never said anything.
Okay,
and
I missed that.
Yeah.
But the observer essentially says, "Thank you for hiding the beacon." And Walter says, "Oh, of course." And that's all we get. So then we're somewhere else again. We're at the search for Walter. People are at the lab. They're trying to make calls looking for him. And Broyles is kind of grilling Peter
about it, yep.
And then they get a call. He was picked up walking the median on I-95. So Walter is being held at the federal building with the FBI, and
there's an interrogation scene.
Interrogation scene with Olivia
and Peter and Olivia.
And he will not say where he hid the device. He says, in fact, he says,
there's a certain amount of mystery to it. Like, he didn't really understand why he did it.
Yeah, he just says at this time, I don't remember where or from whom he was hiding it from. But he essentially says, I believe that I just need to keep it hidden for 4 more hours from the people who are looking for it. And so he hid it, and he doesn't tell them where. Peter is following with the theme of this episode. He is just very ticked off. And he gets in Walter's face, and Walter fires off with, you kind of get a glimpse of the Walter that Peter has kind of alluded to in the past. The man that was his father. And he says, "Why must you be so small-minded?
Like your mother.
Like her. Your mother was, just like your mother. You're always questioning me. I'm not some baby that needs to be tended," or something like that. And Peter just kind of calms down. He smiles a little bit, and he looks at Olivia and said, "Olivia?" Or he said, "Thank you, Walter. That's what I needed. Guilt relieved. Excuse me, Olivia. I think you'll understand why I don't want to be here."
Mm-hmm.
And so he takes off. Walter realizes he said too much, or he's upset him. And Olivia leaves him with his thoughts. Then we see Peter packing to leave, and he's on the phone with somebody, and he was like, "Oh, yeah, I called for a favor too. I need work. Anything, anywhere, preferably not Boston. Just something to put money in my pocket." As he's on the phone, the camera kind of looks over, and you see the attacker, the guy with the energy weapon, is hiding in the shadows of the lab.
Yeah.
So then Olivia gets a call, and it's Astrid, and she's at the lab, and she's like, "When did you see Peter?" Mm-hmm. It was a couple hours ago. Maybe he just took off. And she said, "No, there's clearly a struggle." And you see the lab, and the lab is just
demolished.
There's just stuff everywhere.
I figure, I'm wondering if this assassin character, whatever you want to call him,
mm-hmm.
the one that's seeking out the object, if he was searching the lab for the cylinder before he would do what he's about to do.
Well, that could be. I mean, Peter didn't seem to notice anything out of place before.
Yeah, no, he didn't.
He was there, so I think he just kind of fought with them, and then we see Peter hooked up to the device in some unknown location.
Yep.
Peter is
abducted by the man.
Yeah, he's been abducted by the guy, and he is strapped up in the weird device with the wires up his nose.
Very similar, or pretty much exactly what happened.
It's the exact same thing with
Colonel Jacobson.
And the guy starts to torture him. While he's being tortured, we have the scenes alternating between him being tortured and Olivia and Walter. Olivia showing pictures of surveillance camera footage from outside the Kresge building, and shows the guy, and he says, "Do you know this man?" And Walter's like, "No." And she says, "Well, we believe he's abducted Peter. So then Walter is right on he's very interested to figure this out. Walter says, essentially Olivia goes, is this the guy looking for the device? And did you, but Peter doesn't know because you didn't tell him. And Walter says, no, I didn't tell him, but I didn't need to. So Walter knows that something weird is going on, and we kind of figure out how he figures this out. But he seems to know something of the proximity.
And it gets stranger because there's a little thing that I picked up on that's about to happen. But yeah,
okay.
So they go to the graveyard. The abductor.
Well, before this, when he's getting tortured, let's go ahead and he is tortured. He says, "Think about
hiding space."
Oh, so your father has hidden it, and you don't know where. And Peter hasn't said anything. And the guy's torturing him, and while he's being shocked, he's like, "Think of a time before the institution. Think of a time all the way back when you still thought your father loved you, or you felt like your father loved you." And he goes, and the guy kind of smiles. He says, "See?" And he's like, "Good, good." And he turns it off, and then they get in a car and they go to the graveyard.
Yeah, and they go to They go to a graveyard, and they show several different tombstones. The names of which I don't know if there's any trivia.
No, they only focused on one though.
But they pan over 3 before they get to the final one.
I didn't see the other 3.
Yeah, and the last one is for Robert Bishop. And the guy says something. I don't know if you remember how odd it was.
He said,
"It's too bad you never met him."
Yeah.
And it's like, wait, so did you meet him?
Yeah, it's kind of weird, and we don't really understand what this guy's deal is. But yeah, he says, "Too bad you never met him," and because he died in like 44 or something like that. So we're assuming it's Walter's dad.
Yeah, that's what we're thinking.
I didn't write down the birth year, but so we're assuming Peter's granddad, maybe a great grandfather. But yeah, so he.
Yeah, strange thing for the guy to say.
Very strange thing for the guy to say, but they move around behind, and he digs up the cylinder. It's exactly where he determined it would be, but Olivia shows up while he's digging it out, and he runs off, and. Of course, obligatory chase scene. Every episode has had the Olivia chase scene, and while she ends up pegging the guy a few times.
Yeah, twice at least.
She pops him pretty good, knocks him down, goes over to check on the cylinder, and it burrows.
Yeah, it's good.
She goes back to check on the body. There's a big noise, bright flash, but then there's just a hole where it was. And the observer is watching this. Mm-hmm. It pans back, and there's the observer keeping an eye on her and the cylinder, and he gets back on his little device, and he says, departure on schedule? Yeah. Departure on schedule. But as he's walking away...
Peter comes out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere and tackles the guy.
Yep.
And so... Peter is launching questions at him. It's kind of interesting because it's like it takes a few phrases for the observer to sync up with Peter, because he kind of watches him and he stands very strangely with his head kind of like cocked to the side, and it takes just a little bit of Peter just rattling off because he's still angry and just shouting questions at people, demanding answers, but suddenly the observer starts to speak in sync with him.
Speaks in sync and then speaks faster.
Well, yeah, he's speaking in sync with him, and then keeps, like, Peter starts to speak, but the observer ends up saying 3 more sentences that Peter did not ever utter, but was clearly what Peter was thinking. And those sentences were, "Do you know my father? Did you really speak with him earlier today? And are you his friend?"
Yep. And now, weird thing, this observer pulls a gun.
That looks like a normal, looks like a Glock pistol.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. It looks like
shoots Peter.
But
it's weird technology.
It sounds like it's again not a bullet. It's not the exact same technology as the weapon that the other guy had.
But it feeds on my idea that, two technologically advanced groups that are in competition.
Yeah.
Because you have the observer, whose his items that are technologically superior are very subtle. You have the glasses at the beginning of the show, and now you have this gun that looks like it's not even a big gun. It looks like a little Walther or something.
All of his stuff, could be blended in.
Mm-hmm.
It can meld probably back to the 60s.
Yeah.
I'd have to look up my firearm history, but
yeah,
even that pistol could have been in the 60s. Like a Walther, because I think Bond used a Walther or something. So it looks like just a little semi-automatic.
But this other guy, this John Mosley.
Yeah, we find out his name is John Mosley.
And his gun, however, was this big, massive,
it's got
alien-looking technology thing.
Yeah, it looks to me from a distance, just real fast. It looked like something out of one of my video games, or it even kind of looked like a Cylon Raider on its side, because it kind of had its profile kind of had these two
tuning
curved
fork looking
kind of wings or prongs, and the barrel was almost free floating in the middle between them.
Yep.
But yeah, so the observer just hits him with this energy burst, and it's invisible. It's just like, and Peter falls backward, knocked unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's really.
Yeah, and Olivia finds him. He wakes up.
They go to the hospital.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't know how much time passes when he's kind of knocked out by the observer's weapon, and Olivia finds him.
Yeah, but he goes to the hospital. Broyles and Olivia meet in the hospital briefly, and he says they dug down from the hole, didn't find anything. Once daylight comes, they're going to bring in a excavator. He says, but I don't expect them to find anything. But yeah, it's gone. And so I got the impression from that because he didn't say it's just a hole that keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like it stops and there's nothing else there. So
strange.
It's going somewhere.
Yeah.
Peter and Olivia have a discussion, and Peter pretty much is back to Peter from the previous few episodes. He is beaten all to heck, and she kind of thinks he's got a concussion because he claims that he recounts the incident with the observer. And she was like, I didn't see him. He wasn't there. And he's like, do you think I did this to myself? He was like, Olivia, there's something going on that I don't understand, and I'm not leaving until I do. So he gets his credentials so he doesn't have to have an escort into the federal building. And that's kind of the end of that. So we're going to get Peter indefinitely. He's not itching to leave anymore because now he's got a mystery. And he was faced also with this proximity information gathering, and that he can't. He saw it happen. He was a victim of it, but he has no idea how it occurred. So, the episode, the last two scenes are we get a scene with Peter and Walter in their hotel, where Walter explains essentially osmosis information sharing, or information sharing via osmosis, where if you're close to someone, they can just absorb information off of you. And so he knows it exists, but he knows, and Peter's a little skeptical, but I think it's just argumentative. He's a contrarian, but
he recounts an accident.
He recounts something from their past where it was Thanksgiving. I don't remember if they gave a year.
I think he just said, but you remember this accident? And he's like, of course I remember this accident.
Yeah, so there was an accident. Their car went off the road one Thanksgiving because they were kind of rushing. Went down to a lake. The ice was super thick. It held the car for a few moments, but then the ice broke and the car went down into the water. And so it was Peter and Walter, when Peter was a young boy, almost died by drowning in the lake. And Peter's like, yeah, but you got us out and you got us to shore and you saved the day. And Walter says, no, we were dead. I mean,
Yeah.
we
I didn't have the energy. The water temperature
Yeah.
sapped my strength.
And he said until somebody reached in and grabbed us. And he said he was bald and he had no eyebrows. And he talked to me without ever speaking. And so that was the first time we learned decades ago that Walter met the observer. And what did he say? He essentially said, I'm going to need you for a favor.
I'll need you for a favor. And Walter says it's almost like, when he saw the cylinder, it was like an envelope was open and he knew what his instructions were.
Yeah. And he knew that this was the favor for that man, for his bald friend. For me, I mean, it's this amazing moment in this episode where the last few episodes, I felt like Walter was the epicenter. That Walter's studies and actions were the epicenter of everything that moved forward. It's like Massive Dynamic took his studies, and that's what's caused this pattern. But now it's like there is something that even before Walter was truly getting into science and all that other stuff, before he was really going out with all this, when Peter was still a very small child, Walter was involved in things before Peter was born.
Yeah.
But,
but now it feels like something is bigger than even him.
This episode is unique based on the other ones that we've seen, which granted we're only on episode 4. But we had no appearance by Massive Dynamic.
Yeah.
Walter,
no Nina.
The only time he brings up previous work is Project Thor about the subterranean missiles, but it is clearly a feint to keep Peter off the trail of what the cylinder really is, because he is keeping that information. He's playing his cards close to the chest, and the whole. Because based on what he said, it was like when I saw it, it was like an envelope opened, and I understood my instructions. He knew exactly that this cylinder and capsule or beacon or whatever had nothing to do with Project Thor. But he kept up the appearance of previous investigations where it traced back to his work. And I think that was a cunning maneuver on his part to keep them off the trail, because he knew it had nothing to do with that. But yeah, this had nothing to do with any of Walter's previous studies. This is the first time that we really get a better picture that something bigger is going on, and the bishops are, for some reason, at the center of it.
Yeah.
And so Walter and Peter have this discussion, and Walter pretty much says, all I know is that if you are here right now, you are alive right now. And essentially, you get to, and you wouldn't be if it hadn't have been for him. So, but yeah, that is kind of the emotional close to that portion of the story. And then we get a brief snippet of Olivia coming home, looking for food. Her fridge is clearly empty. I'm pretty much sure it means she doesn't have any milk, because she pours a bowl of dry cereal and a bottle of, she has a bottle of, I think, Johnny Walker Black Label, and she pours some whiskey, and she's picking through her dry cereal, and a figure appears, before the camera's shooting over the dark shoulder.
And of course.
And she looks up and is stunned, and it's John Scott.
And this, it's one of those things where I just
Hello, Olivia.
Yeah. At the beginning of the episode, I had figured that there's this pattern where every episode she's just going to have to be reminded of John Scott, because that's just, it's a great thing to toy with her and the audience. And then wait a second, no, he's actually going to show up at the end. So I'm guaranteeing it. I'm thinking he's going to be at the start of the next episode.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Makes sense.
I feel like, because once it started, I was like, okay, something's going to happen. But I'm pretty sure, yeah, the next episode picks up right there. But I could be wrong. But yeah, so that was episode 4, The Arrival. As far as notable guest stars go, let me pull up my handy dandy list.
Well, the main guest star
Would be
the Colonel.
the Observer.
Well, the Observer, but also Colonel Jacobson.
Oh yeah, and that guy's been in a lot of stuff. Let's see here. Forgot what I was looking at. Episode, cast, and crew. There we go. But yes, we had it. Yeah, I was going to say Nina Sharp is not in this episode, but it does say credit only. Michael Cerverus is the Observer. Let's see. Boom, 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 boom. He's been in a lot of stuff. Goodness. Nothing I've really... Oh, but he's been in, I guess, Gotham. He's in the new Tick series. Let's see. But yeah. This is the main one that I know him from. Because he becomes a common face to look for. Once you realize that he's in all these other episodes, it's like, oh, I gotta find him. Michael Kelly, who played John Mosley, I know him from House of Cards. Mm-hmm. He plays Frank Underwood's assistant. Nestor Serrano was Henry Jacobson. And I have seen him before. Let's see if I can figure out. Oh, he was in The Day After Tomorrow, Bad Boys, Lethal Weapon, the Shooter television show with Ryan Phillippe. I think that's who that is. Yeah. So he's kind of in a lot of stuff. But I don't know if he's ever really a star, or if he's always kind of a side guy. The Last Ship he was on. Didn't you like that show?
The Last Ship?
Yeah.
Not someone I really followed, to be honest.
Okay. Somebody I know liked that show. He's on the TV show Bosch, which is on Amazon Prime, I think. And, yeah, he's just one of those character actors that you see everywhere. But let's see trivia for this episode. I don't think there was really any other notable guest stars. No, just just a whole bunch of nobodies. Well, they're not nobodies, but I mean, as far as the episode goes, they were nobodies. But we have here for trivia, which actually the goof is actually incorrect. Mm-hmm. The goof given for this episode was that that he ordered 13 jalapenos, and I was like, no, he ordered 11. But he says what he actually gets are sliced green peppers. And I was like, probably because he actually has to eat it. So they're not going to make this guy eat 11 jalapenos. Let's see. But yes. Oh, when Peter is taken to the graveyard to dig up the cylinder, we are to assume it is his grandfather's grave. Oh, this is a continuity goof. However, the date of death is listed as 44, while Walter's date of birth is given as 46 in the pilot.
Oh, that's
interesting.
Definitely a goof, yeah.
Could have been a great-grandfather, maybe. Anachronisms, factual errors. Nobody cares about factual errors. It's sci-fi, guys.
Now, they do say on some other trivia that, this was a spoiler-free trivia that's out there, and that is that the character of Mosley is wearing a beanie that has some symbols on his hat, 2 green and 1 red, which they say are 3 green and 1 red thing, which will be a reoccurring theme. So
you don't know what green, red means yet. It was actually going to be a suggestion for the name of the podcast, but I didn't give it to you because it was kind of spoilery. But yes, that will come up. Mm-hmm. It comes up a lot. Amanda and I will sometimes see things and we'll go green, red. But yes, apparently it's on his hat. The glyphs at the ad break spell the word rogue. Which that is something we didn't mention. When Broyles gives the identity of the man that she shoots, of Mosley, he's had some drug charges and was either charged or convicted of a homicide the previous year in Seattle. And she's like, that's a long way to go looking for this thing. And so, I mean, he really seems like nobody. But, so why was he looking for this thing? What? Yeah. Is it an organization? Is it a temporal-based organization that is traveling through time? We don't know. It's just weird crap. The Observer, rather than appearing briefly, features prominently in this story. Duh. But anyhow, so that's our trivia, as according to IMDb. I'm hoping that watching it the second time and trying to watch it with a more observant eye, that I will notice things that play into it later. But I didn't notice the green, red, so I'm a little bit disappointed in myself about that. But that was our episode, and that's our show. Again, check out us on social media and all the places. Patreon, Facebook, Patreon, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Passion Nerdly. You can find us. If you find Passion Nerdly, you can find me. I am known as RueWorks on Twitter and Instagram. And probably, if you guys are around enough and you follow me or you know me from anything, you've probably seen me as Roxy Lou also. So, but yeah, look for us. Check out our Patreon. If you would care to support us, that would be awesome. We understand if you don't. Any level is greatly appreciated. There are perks and other episodes and other podcasts and little tidbits and gifts if you essentially subscribe at higher levels. But we thank you guys for listening, and check out our shirts on TeePublic.
Absolutely.
And that's it for this episode of Pattern Recognition. We will talk to you all later.
This has been a production of the Southgate Media Group. For more podcasts like this one, head over to southgatemediagroup.com.